Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're stepping into the world of a truly fascinating wild animal that you might not have heard of, the pole.
That's right. They're also called Asiatic wild dogs, or sometimes red dogs.
And they're wild members of the dog family, like wolves and foxes. But sadly, adult populations are, well, they're in trouble around the world.
Mostly because they're losing their homes, their habitat, and also their food sources are disappearing.
Yeah. Now, look, if this is the first time you're hearing about dholes, that's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
Our mission today is really just to understand what these animals are, why they're so important to the places they live, and, what challenges they're actually facing.
And for this deep dive, we've looked into quite a range of scientific studies. These really shed light on bullhole habitats, the dangers they encounter,
Okay.
and their activity patterns too, especially focusing on Southeast Asia and India.
Right, some key areas.
And they use some really interesting methods, ways to try and understand these, well, pretty elusive creatures.
Exactly. So by the end of our conversation today, you should have a good grasp of holes and, maybe more importantly, why conserving them should matter to all of us.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. What exactly is a dhole?
Well, like you said, they're wild candidates. So same family as our pet dogs, wolves, foxes.
Okay.
Our sources don't dive super deep into their specific physical features, but it's key to know they are a distinct species.
Right, not just a feral dog or something.
No, exactly. But what the studies do emphasize is how social they are. They live and hunt together in packs,
Ah, packs. Okay.
which makes them, very effective predators. Teamwork.
So they're team players when it comes to hunting. What kind of things do these packs hunt and eat?
Their diet is mainly other mammals. In Southeast Asia, they prey mostly on what scientists call ungulates.
Ungulates. What's that?
It's just the term for hoofed animals, things like gar, which are big wild cattle, muntjac deer, sambar deer, cirro, kind of goat antelope, and wild boar.
Okay, a range of hoofed animals.
Yeah, and in one study in Baluran National Park in Indonesia, researchers also found evidence they eat domestic cattle sometimes, dancing another type of wild cattle, water buffalo, and Timor deer, among others.
Wow.
So yeah, they're carnivores, meat eaters, with a pretty diverse menu depending on where they happen to live.
Hoofed animals, sometimes livestock.
Ah,
Okay, so they're out there hunting. But why should maybe someone new to conservation, why should they care if falls are doing okay or not?
that's a really vital question. Dholes, because they're predators, play this critical role in keeping their ecosystems healthy.
Oh, so.
They help control the populations of the animals they hunt. Think about it, if you don't have enough predators,
Right.
certain prey animals might become too numerous. And that can actually damage the vegetation, throw the whole environment out of balance.
So they stop things from getting out of whack, basically.
Exactly. This regulation, it's not just about the sheer numbers. It can also affect the health and even the behavior of the prey species, stopping them from overgrazing certain areas, which helps make the whole ecosystem more resilient.
Okay, so they're like nature's managers, keeping things in check.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And there's another angle, too. When we focus on protecting holes, it often has this positive knock-on effect.
Oh.
Yeah, it tends to help other animals and plants in the same area that might be facing similar threats. Conservation efforts for one species can benefit a whole community of life.
I see. So by helping holes, we're kind of casting a wider net of protection.
You got it. And it's really crucial to remember where many holes live. Southeast Asia, for instance, is what we call a biodiversity hotspot.
Meaning?
Just incredibly rich in unique plants and animals, many found nowhere else on Earth.
Wow.
So when top predators like dholes start disappearing from these special regions, it's often a big red flag. It signals broader environmental problems that are likely affecting countless other species, too.
Okay, that definitely paints a clearer picture. They're not just some obscure wild dog. They're a vital piece of the puzzle in some very special places. So where exactly do these important animals live?
Well, the sources we looked at mainly focus on mainland Southeast Asia. Countries like Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Peninsular Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam.
Oh, that
region.
volcano.
And we also have some information from Indonesia, specifically Baluran National Park, particularly when discussing their activity patterns.
And are they picky about their homes? What kind of habitats do they need?
It's interesting, they're actually considered habitat generalists.
Meaning they're adaptable.
Yeah, they can live in a range of environments. But the key things they absolutely need are forest cover, and crucially, enough prey animals to hunt.
Makes sense. Food and shelter.
Exactly. They're found in different types of forests, evergreen forests, deciduous forests where trees lose their leaves. And like we saw in Ballura National Park, they can even live in savanna-type landscapes. So, adaptable, yes.
Adaptable, but they still need those forests and enough food.
Got it. Now, one of the studies, it had a pretty worrying prediction about habitat, didn't it?
Yes, that's right. One study estimated that less than 20%, less than a fifth of the remaining forest in those Southeast Asian countries they studied is actually likely to be suitable for dholes.
Wow, less than 20%. That really drives home the pressure they're under.
It's a significant loss of potential places for them to live, absolutely.
But that study also mentioned something called strongholds, which sounds a bit more hopeful. What are those?
Right. Strongholds are basically areas that are large enough and have low enough levels of threats that they could potentially support boonwhale populations for the long term, kind of like core areas.
Okay, safe zones almost.
Sort of. The study identified the Western Forest Complex, which straddles Thailand and Myanmar, specifically the Cuon Wildlife Sanctuary there, as the primary stronghold.
The main one. And then secondary strongholds included Taman Negara in Malaysia and a landscape in northeastern Cambodia. So yeah, a stronghold is a really key area for a species' survival prospects.
Gotcha. Now, the research also looked at tolls in India, right, in the Western Ghats. What did we learn from there?
Yes, the India study provided some important insights too. It showed that tolls occupy a pretty significant area in the Western Ghats. But importantly, a lot of this area is actually outside officially protected reserves, like national parks.
Oh, interesting. So they're not just sticking to the parks.
No. And that tells us that conservation efforts need to think beyond just those protected area boundaries. The study also confirmed that on a larger scale, where holes are found is really closely linked to how much prey is available. More food, more holes, essentially.
No, okay, prey is key.
But here's a concerning bit. Even inside a protected reserve, human activity, human disturbance, seemed to negatively impact where burrowed holes were likely to use the habitat.
So even in places supposedly safe for them, human presence can still push them away or make them avoid certain areas.
It seems so, yes, which highlights how sensitive they can be.
Okay, so what are the main threats then? What's causing all these problems for tools?
Well, sadly, they face quite a few serious threats. Probably the biggest one is habitat loss.
Right, we mentioned that.
Yeah, mainly forests being cleared for agriculture, farms, and other development. Southeast Asia has seen massive deforestation, and that directly shrinks the space holes have to live.
No forests, no home. Makes sense. What else?
Another huge issue is prey depletion. Basically, not enough food for them.
Why is that happening?
It's often due to overhunting by people, and also the widespread use of traps and snares, which catch not only the intended animals, but also toll prey, reducing their numbers.
Ah, so people are taking their food source.
Exactly. And unfortunately, in some areas, dholes themselves are also hunted or killed directly.
Oh, really? Why?
Sometimes may be seen as pests if they predate livestock, or perhaps for other reasons. The sources mention local hunting as a frequently reported threat.
Okay. And what about diseases?
That's another significant danger, that diseases passed on from domestic dogs.
Or pets?
Yeah, especially where human settlements push up against coaly habitat and dogs roam freely. There's overlap. One study actually found domestic dogs were present in a really high percentage of the monitored sites.
Wow. That sounds like a really serious and maybe overlooked threat.
It definitely is. And then on top of those main things, you have other pressures like people collecting firewood or other resources from the forest, just general human disturbance from roads or people simply being around, and potentially even competition with other large carnivores, though that's less clear from these sources.
It really sounds like they're getting squeezed from all sides. So given all this, how do scientists actually study these animals? They sound pretty hard to find.
They are elusive. One of the most crucial tools, as I mentioned briefly, is the camera trap.
Right, the automatic cameras.
Exactly. They're triggered by movement, take photos or videos. This lets researchers detect tolls, see what prey is around, study their behavior, all without having to physically be there, disturbing them.
So it's like having hidden wildlife photographers working 24/7.
Pretty much. Scientists also use something called habitat suitability models.
Okay, what's that? Sounds complex.
It's basically using computer analysis to create predictive maps. They combine information about the environment, like forest type, elevation, distance to water, with data on prey availability and known coal locations to predict where tolls are most likely to be found or where the habitat is most suitable for them. Think of it as creating a probability map for holes.
Ah, okay. So these models help them figure out where to focus conservation efforts, maybe.
Precisely. They help prioritize areas. And sometimes, especially when there isn't a ton of hard data, researchers might use something called Bayesian belief networks.
Whoa, okay, another technical term.
Yeah, it sounds fancy, but it's essentially a structured way to combine different kinds of information, expert opinions, data from maps, existing research to assess things like threat levels. It's useful when you're dealing with uncertainty.
So, like making the best educated guess possible with the available clues?
Kind of, yeah, a very structured, logical guess. Then the study in India used a technique called occupancy modeling.
Occupancy modeling.
Yeah. This is a statistical method that helps estimate the probability that a species is actually present in an area, while accounting for the fact that you might not always detect it, even if it's there.
Oh, right. Just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it wasn't around.
Exactly. Researchers do surveys looking for tolls or their tracks, scat, etc., recording detections and non-detections. The model then figures out the likelihood of presence versus the likelihood of just missing it during the survey.
That sounds much more accurate than just counting how many times you see them.
It generally gives a more robust picture of distribution, yes. And finally, they study activity patterns using that camera trap data.
Learning when they're active.
Right. The study in Baluran National Park in Indonesia found holes there might be shifting their activity more towards dawn and dusk.
What's the term for that?
Crepuscular.
Crepuscular. Okay.
And the researchers suggested this might be because it's cooler than in that more open savanna habitat, or maybe because there are no tigers there anymore. Tigers might have previously influenced when dholes felt safe being active.
Interesting. So the absence of another predator changes their behavior.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
They also saw differences in activity between dhole packs and when dholes were seen alone, or just in pairs.
It's amazing how they adapt. So given all these threats and everything we're learning, what can actually be done? What helps dholes?
Well, the research points towards several key actions. First and foremost is proactive resource management. That means strong legal protection for the places they still live.
Protecting their remaining homes?
Yes. Preventing more deforestation, making sure existing protected areas are actually managed well, and enforcing laws against things like poaching.
Okay, strong protection. What else?
Maintaining and improving habitat connectivity is also crucial.
Connectivity, you mean linking up forest patches?
Exactly. Making sure there are safe corridors or pathways that allow dholes to move between fragmented areas of forest. This is vital for them to find mates, find enough food, and maintain genetic diversity.
Right, so they don't get stuck in isolated pockets.
Precisely. In smaller habitat patches, we might even need more active hands-on site management. For instance, maybe trying to increase the number of prey animals available for them.
Ah, okay. Managing the food source, too.
And of course, directly tackling those threats we talked about. That means stepping up law enforcement against poaching and snaring, but also working with local communities.
How does that help?
Things like finding ways to reduce human-whole conflict, maybe compensation schemes if livestock are lost, and definitely things like programs to vaccinate domestic dogs near audal habitats to stop disease spread.
Getting local people involved sounds absolutely key.
It really is. Long-term conservation success almost always depends on the support and participation of the people who live alongside the wildlife.
Makes sense.
And alongside all that, we simply need more research. We still need better information on exactly where dholes are, how many there are, their population densities, and precisely how different threats are impacting them in different places. This helps target conservation actions effectively.
Keep learning more.
Yes. And finally, because the dholed holes don't respect international borders, that Western Forest Complex spans Thailand and Myanmar, remember?
Right.
International collaboration is essential. Countries need to share data and coordinate conservation planning, especially for these transboundary populations.
It definitely sounds like it takes a multi-pronged approach. Lots of different efforts working together.
It really does.
Okay, well, let's try and wrap up our deep dive into the world of dholes. What are the main takeaways for us today?
I think the key things to remember are that date holes are ecologically important predators. They play a vital role. But they're facing really serious threats, mainly from losing their habitat and their food sources disappearing.
But there's hope.
There is. Scientists are using some really innovative research methods, camera traps, modeling, genetic studies perhaps, to understand where the critical populations are and figure out the best ways to protect them.
Okay. And just to bring it back home, why should this matter to you, our listener, especially if you're maybe new to conservation?
Because the fate of the whole is really tied to the overall health of the ecosystems they inhabit, these incredibly rich forests and landscapes.